President Buhari commends the tenacious spirit of Vice President Osinbajo over helicopter crash.
Investors applaud President Buhari on hydrocarbon exploration in Gombe and Abuja states.
INEC reacts to attack on its Aba office.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall look into the alleged plot to disrupt the 2019 general elections.
Right now, security and welfare of the people is, of course, the primary concern of leaders, and that's irrespective of systems and, of course, at all tiers of government.
You're right, Chloe, and security, of course, is key at whatever point of governance for the society to thrive and ramp up development on all indices. It's even more pertinent to double such efforts at enhancing security in an electioneering period such as we are in already.
All right, of course, Kingsley, those are true words you've said that. And for a nation that has witnessed series of violence, of course, in past elections, before, during, and after, now, ensuring safety of the citizenry and putting robust security arrangement in place should be paramount, of course, now that the electoral process is reaching or has reached its peak.
Now, remember, Claire, just a fortnight ago, we discussed on this program arms proliferation and the 2019 general elections. Now, we are returning to the security subject again today based on the reports received from the Office of the National Security Advisor last week on the plot, quote, to precipitate widespread violence aimed at scuttling the conduct of the poll, to cause crisis that could snowball into endless crises for the government and the citizens, end of quote.
Well, Kingsley, those seem to be the exact words, but the insecurity concern raised by some government officials on the alleged plan to cause mayhem has been the subject of discourse in many quarters, of course, in the last few days, and that's in view of its consequences on the conduct of the general elections and peaceful coexistence of the country.
So one question to ask is, what is the interest of those who are planning to unleash violence on Nigeria and Nigerians? And what role should Nigerians themselves play individually and collectively to ensure that these elements who are planning mayhem do not succeed in their plot? And what steps should be taken to nip the plot in the bud? Now, these are some of the questions, of course, we shall be putting to our guests while we are on our conversation segments on Good Morning Nigeria.
And indeed, of course, Kingsley Osadolo is here, and I am Claire Dilabu Abdurazak, joining him, of course, to welcome you to our first broadcast this week of the program. And as always, we have the complementary segments of the program, talking about newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. For now, Usman Aliu is with us here this morning to give us the morning news. Usman, good to have you with us.
Good morning, Claire and Kingsley. Here is the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has commended the tenacious spirit displayed by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, after he survived the helicopter crash in Kaba, Kogi State. Reacting to the incident in a telephone conversation with the Vice President, President Buhari praised Almighty God for sparing his life. In a statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, President Buhari said he is impressed by his tenacity, which enabled him continue on the campaign engagement despite the shock caused by the crash. Meanwhile, a Thanksgiving service for the survival of the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, and others who survived a helicopter crash in Kaba, Kogi State on Saturday was held at the Redeemed Christian Church of God headquarters in Lokoja. In the meantime, Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo is expected to witness the second train test from Iju to Abeokuta on the Lagos-Ibadan Standard Gauge Rail line soon. Minister of Transportation Rotimi Amechi disclosed this while witnessing the first train ride on trial on the route. Dotun Oguyemi reports that passengers are to enjoy 2 months of free train ride on the route before it becomes fully operational.
He wanted to stop at Abado, and I said no. He wanted to stop at 79. He didn't want to get to Abuja. I said no, you must get to Abuja. Now he's going to Abuja. In fact, he's crossing Abuja after the tunnel to a platform where we'll drop the passengers. And then he's also, today, he will get to Iju. I'm hoping that on the 6th, like the NRC has said, we can get the Vice President to just hop in and hop out.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Jeffrey Onyama is leading a mobilization campaign for the re-election of President Muhammadu Buhari across the 17 local government areas of Enugu State. Correspondent Makut Simon Macham reports that the grassroots mobilization kicked off in 3 local government councils where the APC was short of votes.
Buhari is for us. He is for the poor people.
For realignment of Igbo man into the mainstream of politics of Nigeria. There's a reason why we are following Buhari.
Important to vote for Muhammadu Buhari for another 4 years. If not, we will suffer and Nigeria will go back.
Suspected hoodlums on Sunday set ablaze the Ishiala Ngwal South local government area office of the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) and electoral materials destroyed. The commission has, however, vowed to bring the perpetrators to book.
The resident electoral commissioners have been directed to beef up security at all the local government offices of the Independent National Electoral Commission. It is a very unfortunate incident, and I hope and pray that this will be the last incident that we are going to record as we move towards the 2019 general elections. This election should on no account whatsoever be characterized by violence. Anybody who wants to perpetrate violence should desist from henceforth because the Independent National Electoral Commission has pledged to be neutral in this election and will not pander to the dictates of any political party.
Now to more development stories in the energy sector. Critical stakeholders have commended federal government for the resuming of exploration of hydrocarbon in Bauchi and Gombe states. Correspondent Lydia Samson reports that some Nigerians who spoke to NTA News said the gesture will provide employment opportunities for teeming youths in the country.
Local content is really working. As you can see, the rig standing here, we have only maybe 2 or 3 expatriates here, not like before. Before you put this rig here, you did 50%, 60, 70 has to be expatriates.
Very, very, very unique day for us, for the side of this country, and particularly this community and Nigeria as a whole. This marks the beginning of prosperity of this area.
And talking security, the Nigerian Air Force says it will continue to place premium on capacity building and also explore opportunities to make its presence felt across the country for effective deployment of air power. Chief of the Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Baba Abubakar, stated this at the inauguration of a commando training village at Nigerian Air Force Base in Bauchi State.
We are building capacity in force protection and also critical asset protection. And so we are working with the other security agencies in both Zamfara and Benue State in order to show that we are really building what we require. And this commando village will no doubt go a long way in helping us to build the required capacity to be able to secure Nigeria.
And that's the news for now. Your favorite program, Good Morning Nigeria, continues with Claire and Kinsley after this break. Stay with us.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and Presently, I have a cassava farm and a yam farm. My name is Shinazo Gochku. I'm from Imo State. I have been doing business in this area since past 7 years without any help. When I had this government something that's helping people, I go to them. They give me money. I have got 50,000 from them, and I pay back. I pray to God, let government give to other people so that the money will correspond to everybody. As I myself, I'm very happy, and my family. I pray God to give to other people so that they will enjoy this money with me, and enjoy this government with me.
Manager people, make we make the right choice, yo. Make we vote for a man of integrity. Hey, so make we gather together and make this change. Work, my people of Nigeria. Together we go carry Nigeria to the next level. Nigeria don't decide. Vote Baba Buhari. Baba Buhari, the man of integrity. Hey, vote Baba Buhari. Man, we no corrupt, we no go chop our money. Hey. Agriculture, the next level. Fight corruption, the next level. Good roads, to the next level. Electricity, to the next level. Railway, the next level. Empower, the next level. Greater money. For good health we go. Baba Buhari. My people, for the next level. APC, next level. Naija people, make we all come out to vote Baba Buhari.
This message is from Buhari Next Level Group.
Mass Medical Mission, MMM, is offering free services on a wide range of medical issues. Take advantage of these offers, especially by availing yourself of the National Cancer Prevention Program, NCPP. You can do so by coming for our Wellness Wednesday program at 31 Bode Thomas Street, Surulere, Lagos, every Wednesday from 7 a.m. You also have the opportunity of seeing the specialist and getting expert opinion on any health issues that may have been bothering you. Are you preparing to get married to your sweetheart? Then we have a pre-marital health program that will help you ensure that you start your married life on a healthy footing. Very important health screening and counseling will be made available for you and your partner. You can avail yourself of this opportunity by attending our pre-wedding Wednesday program from 7 a.m. For inquiries, send a mail to info@pinkcruise.org or log on to www.pinkcruise.org or call 0805-633-4288. Mission Pink Cruise, taking wellness to all.
Right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria broadcast live here on NTA, of course, NTA, Africa's largest TV network. Let's talk business now. Intra-African trade is a notch higher as Fund for Export Development in Africa becomes operational. Now, targets $10 million investment in 2019. Joy Uzo has the details.
It's good to have you join us on Business News. We'll start with investment opportunities to boost intra-African trade. To this end, the operationalization of the newly created Fund for Export Development in Africa, FIDA, has commenced duties in full force with the holding of the pre-incorporation meeting of the Board of Directors in Cairo. FIDA, a wholly owned development-oriented subsidiary of the African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, has been set up to implement the bank's equity investment program by providing seed capital to companies in Afrexim Bank's key focus sectors, including agribusiness, manufacturing, consumer and retail, financial services, technology, travel and tourism, transport and logistics, and industrial parks. It will invest across all market segments, but will have its greatest focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. The long-term objective of FIDA is the provision of equity capital and related financial, non-financial, and support services to operators in Africa's tradable and support sectors, with emphasis on activities that support intra-African trade and value-added exports. The fund, which was set up with an initial $100 million commitment, will also seek to leverage on the role Afreximbank has played in mobilizing trade finance into Africa to also mobilize foreign direct investment, FDI, into the continent. Addressing the pre-incorporation meeting, Professor Benedict Orama, chairman of the board of directors of FIDA and president of Afreximbank, said that the fund would expand Afreximbank's offerings to include vital equity investments that would boost intra-African trade. A feasibility study conducted for Afreximbank identified funding gap as a major factor inhibiting intra-African trade. FIDA had therefore been set up to provide equity and to leverage foreign direct investments to help close that gap. FIDA would start investment activities this 2019 with a target to invest $10 million during the year and also targeting to raise $450 million in FDI during the period. Now to energy matters. Nigeria, Norway and Angola has been rated as the largest deep-water oil producers in the world. This is in addition to Brazil and the United States. A Norwegian research group, Rystad Energy, reviewed this in its latest report and expands that global deep-water oil production is expected to grow by 700,000 barrels per day this year to hit a record high of more than 10 million barrels per day. Nigeria's oil and gas production structure is majorly split between joint ventures onshore and in shallow water with foreign and local companies in production sharing contracts in deep water offshore, to which many international oil companies have shifted their focus in recent years. With a number of large fields starting up in Brazil and US, Gulf of Mexico, deep water liquid production will reach 10.3 million barrels per day in 2019. Rystad said Brazil, US, Nigeria, Norway and Angola would continue to be the largest deep-water producers. Deep-water projects have attracted nearly half of global exploration investment over the past decade and have delivered a similar share of new production volumes. As global oil production from maturing shallow water areas such as the North Sea declines, new offshore volumes were expected to become increasingly reliant on flows from deep-water fields. The International Energy Agency has estimated that the share of deep-water in total offshore production will rise to 30% in 2040 from 23% currently. And a review from the equities market shows that a total turnover of 1.807 billion shares worth 17.232 billion naira in 18,332 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 1.36% to close the week at 31,426.63 and 11.719 trillion naira respectively. Similarly, all other indices finished higher with the exception of the NSE ASEM, NSE Consumer Goods, NSE Oil and Gas, NSE Lotus Islamic Index, and NSE Industrial Goods indices that depreciated by 0.17%, 0.41%, 1.32%, 0.60%, and 2.02% respectively. That review from the equities market concludes business news. Many thanks for your time. I'm Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Newspaper Review is next on the program.
And we're together again with Bayo Toyobi on Newspaper Review. Bayo, it was a good weekend for you.
Yes, it was very restful. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Kinsley.
Right,
good morning, Nigeria.
That's right. Good to see you. Well, of course, from the New Telegraph, it's a continuing story on the crash landing of the chopper that was conveying Vice President and other aides at the weekend. It comes with a kicker. That's New Telegraph. Crash. Devil wanted to take Oshibajo's life. That's according to Adeboye. And 3 riders, plus a 4th one, it says, Vice President, Only God can take the glory for saving our lives. 8. How security pulled us out of a wreckage. And Buhari Lords Oshibajo. AIB, that's Accident Investigation Bureau, begins probe on crash. And you can see the photograph there of the Vice President along with the Minister of State for Labour, Professor Stephen Ochene, and other aides during the Thanksgiving service at Lokoja yesterday. Now, of course, elsewhere on the front page of the New Telegraph, you have political stories. Just below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, says Tinubu halts impeachment moves against Ambode. Tinubu halts impeachment moves against Ambode. That's on page 5. And federal government records 910.41 billion naira deficit in Q4. That's quarter 4 of 2018. Ondo raises emergency committee as 100. That's 100 persons contract Lassa fever. That's page 9. And thousands of PVCs burnt as fire raises INEC office. Details can be found on page 8. And right at the foot of the front page also of the New Telegraph, we have this headline. That is the second lead story. NEF, that's the Northern Elders Forum, Afenifere, Ohaneze, Pandef, MBF endorse Atiku and 2 riders. APC, they endorsed Jonathan in 2015. Kayamo, it's a big fraud. There's a story there saying exposing children to too much toothpaste will lead to tooth decay. That's on page 6.
That's interesting, Kingsley. All right, let's look at other stories. The story on the survival of the Vice President and the crew members is also on the front page of all the papers, including the Punch. But the Punch has a rider to its own headline. We were lucky helicopter didn't burst into flames. And that's from Ujudu, right there. But the lead story on the front page of Daily Trust and the Punch, again, you can see the picture stories of the picture if the papers are on your screen. It says, political violence rocks Kogi or your Delta states. Army parades thugs with dangerous weapons in Sokoto. It's on Daily Trust. You can see the pictures of those paraded, the suspected political thugs with weapons allegedly recovered from them during the arrest by troops of 8th Division, Nigerian Army on exercise Egweke 3 in conjunction with other security agencies along Ilela Damfulani Guadabawa Road in Sokoto at the weekend. I know Bayo will be able to pronounce that road properly. All right, let's look at other stories trending also. You find just beneath, at the bottom of the Punch newspaper, Ambode will no longer be removed. That's according to Tinubu. Details of that on page 6. And court asked to disqualify Wike for alleged forgery. Details of that on page 10. And budget delayed policy threatens foreign investment, says NECA. Details of that on page 30. And Zamfara APC faction asked INEC to accept its candidates, page 34. Now, this is bizarre. Mother says own baby for 200,000 naira in Niger. 15 die in Ogun auto crashes. Okay, those are some of the stories. Bayo, let's get on with it.
Yes, indeed. The nation held its breath when the news broke of the helicopter crash in Kaba on Saturday. But Vice President Yemi Oshibajo said God can take the glory for saving the lives of him and 9 crew members in the helicopter crash at Kaba on Saturday. He's speaking at the Thanksgiving at Lokoja. He said it would have been breaking news in local and international media, but God had not allowed it to happen. He said, God, the one who can do all things, and only him can take the glory. We bless his name forever and ever. This was at the Thanksgiving at Lokoja. At the Redeemed Christian Church of God in the headquarters, the General Overseer Pastor Enoch Adeboye asked the congregation to rise and give glory to God for saving the life of his son. He said, God put the devil to shame. In the sermon, he said, let all the nations of the world rise in praise of God. A coalition of Christian groups have called on the federal government to investigate the helicopter crash that involved the vice president. Reverend Daniel Kazai, president of the group, also sought prayers for the vice president that escaped the plane crash twice now, according to him, within 7 months. He also drew your attention to what he described as similar suspicious incidents in the past. He claims that there was a clash that was involving Patrick Yakuwa, the late former governor of Kaduna, and the former late National Security Advisor, General Owoye Azazi, and another crash in Jos involving AIG John Haruna. He says they were all top Christian leaders, and he has called for investigation. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Air Force has come to clarify that the helicopter that crash landed at Kaba does not belong to the Nigerian Air Force. Spokesman for the Nigerian Air Force, Air Commander Ibikule Daramola, says the aircraft belong to Caveton helicopters. He said the Air Force is worried and has to make this clarification because there are pictures of a military helicopter 101 going on the social media, and they are claiming that that was the helicopter that crashed and it belongs to the Nigerian Air Force. For the benefit of that, the helicopter that crashed at Kaba does not belong to the Nigerian Air Force.
Yeah, it's a pretty sad incident that occurred at the weekend, but the happy news is the fact that there was no life lost.
Yes.
You know, but one point that I found very instructive in all of this. I mean, the AIB, that's the Asset Investigation Bureau, will deal with the details of what went on once they get the black box and so on and so forth. But you could see at some point the landing ground, that's to say the Kaba Stadium.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a lot of dust was kicked up. And if that was the field, and this is what you find all across Nigeria, football pitches or soccer pitches have not a blade of grass. So what are people doing? I mean, you find it from north to south, east to west. We can't maintain simple, football pitch. And I'm sure if you had grass all over the place, perhaps the dust, it might not have been that much.
Usually, wherever you have a heliport, there's always a concrete base for which the helicopter can land. Now, when you land in a place that is a dust bowl, naturally, the propeller of the helicopter will raise dust, and it become a hazard, even for the pilot, to see the ground properly. So it was not a planned thing, but you have a campaign going on, and they felt at the stadium because a helicopter can land there. And unfortunately, thanks to Providence, there were no deaths. But in future, we have to be very, very careful. If helicopter has to land, if there has to be a nearby place where there is a concrete basement, it's better than going to land in a field. The point you have raised also is very instructive. Yes. We have stadia that sometimes we invest so much money in growing grass, but go back to that same stadium 1 year later, you find bare ground. And that is why most of the time our professional footballers that play abroad are very reluctant in coming to play for their nation. That's why sometimes they select specific stadium. They prefer to go and play at Akwa Ibom, which is new, or Asaba, or Port Harcourt, because the grass there is supple and actually in healthy condition. Most of the other places, you have bare grass.
Absolutely. Just, just bare ground.
Bare ground, I mean.
Bare ground with
yes.
dust and pebbles all over the place. I mean, I've flown an helicopter before. In an helicopter, rather, not me piloting it. And I mean, there was no helipad, but because the ground was sufficiently grassed, I mean, you didn't have a lot of dust, picking up.
Right. We thank God that there was no injury and no loss of life.
The other story that is also making rounds is the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, who says that he's moved to tears by the endorsement by leaders of national subgroups. This was a reaction to by Atiku Abubakar, that the announced endorsement of Afenifere, Northern Elders Forum, Ohaneze Ndigu, and Pan-Niger Delta Forum of his candidature. Elijah Atiku Abubakar says the endorsement has given him more courage to work hard and win the election and return Nigeria to its glory. The earlier announcement by Ohaneze Ndigu about a week or so ago and Afenifere have all attracted reactions and counter-reactions. Ohanese's declaration was faced by a renouncement by some members of that group. Similarly, that of Afenifere was also countered by a splinter group. The danger here now is that, nevertheless, they are supposedly to be socio-cultural groups, and they are avenues for rallying persons for national, ethnic, and regional interests. While some see it as a positive development Others see that this is dangerous for them because they are delving into political activities, and because all their memberships are supposed to cut across political parties. And people draw attention that, like traditional rulers, like religious leaders, such sub-national group leaders ought to be neutral. After all, if they have interest, they ought not to come to the public domain to apparently to declare it. Having declared it, the tendency is that they tend to pitch the nation along paths, and therefore continue to also contribute to hitting the polity.
Okay, Bayo, let's quickly, we just have less than a minute to round off this segment. CCT resumes trial of Onogan today. Daily Trust trending at the bottom. Kogi probes Deputy Governor over alleged bribery. Details of that on page 6. And experts speak on 8 trillion naira FIRS 2019 target. It's on page 17. But there's a story that needs to be mentioned here. It's on page 8 of Daily Trust also. And it reads, Northeast insurgents pretending to be good Samaritans. And this is coming from the army. Just a paragraph or two. The theater commander of the Operation Lafayette Dole in Borno State says insurgents now engage in cattle rustling and return rustled cattle to their owners deceitfully, creating the impression of being good Samaritans and pretending to be the people's protectors in the Northeast. Now, of course, the message here is that this is a dangerous ploy that must be nipped in the bud before it gets out of control.
Yes, actually.
Just before you take that, let me take some stories from the Daily Sun newspaper. And here, a piece beside the nameplate says, 2019, federal government plots to intimidate more judges. Wike alleges. That's on page 39. And the story of the endorsement, which Bayo has already discussed, you see there just below the name flag. And 2019 again, how winners will emerge according to INEC. And the story, in essence, is saying that results will be transmitted manually and not electronically. That's collation and transmission of results. And then below the photograph of the, on the front page, they're showing members of the National Executive Committee of IPMAN, that's Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria. You have a number of headlines there, but I'll take 2 or 3 of them. It says, only NEC will call off ASU strike. That's according to the president of ASU. That's page 6. And dark clouds over Onogan's appearance at Code of Conduct Tribunal, page 3. And on page 40, there is a story from the Daily Sun saying that Senator Joseph Waku has died in the United States of America.
That's a sad one. I was just going to refer to the story read by Claire, particularly the subterfuge now used by the insurgents. The best approach to that is to go to the radio stations in that part of the country and make sure that they are translated to the local languages so that the people will be very familiar of that subterfuge. The other interesting story is the fire that has raised an INEC office in Umuika in Abia State. It is said that some person suspected to have set the room alight through the toilet of one room. And the only room that got burnt there is the room where it was housing PVCs. It is speculated that hundreds of thousands of PVCs were burnt. The strange thing is that a similar incident was said to have occurred in 2015 at Mboku in Obingwa local government area prior to gubernatorial election. I begin to wonder why they will not have fire-safe devices for the PVCs, especially that where they had such a previous experience and fire.
That's right. But the most important thing is to go, if they were arsonists, the most important thing is for the law enforcement agents to go after them.
Yes, you go after them, but the harm has already been done.
It's been done, yes, but of course punishment should not be left undone. I think that's the most important thing. Let's take our editorial bio, and it's coming from the Daily Trust newspaper at page 45. NIMET's 2019 seasonal rainfall prediction. The paper says that the forecast indicates that Nigeria is expected to experience below normal rainfall season. That's to say that the rains are expected to start late, especially in the northern parts of the country, while the southeastern zone as well as the coastal areas will experience a normal onset. And most northern states will experience earlier than normal end growing season. Of course, the editorial makes its own predictions. Yes. Makes its own comments on what's supposed to happen, particularly with regard to extension services.
Yes, indeed. I think this is very timely, and I think the Nigeria Meteorological Services Agency should be up and doing with the National Orientation Agency, particularly to alert our farmers across the country. What the editorial is happening on is that there's going to be a long period of dry spell in the northern states, and it will last between 10 to 18 days. And they also say that in the southern states, particularly in the south-south and the southeast, there will be rains, but then there's a tendency that the rain season will cease earlier than expected. This rain cycle, for instance, the flood we had last year, experience has showed that it is in a 4-year cycle. It comes once every 4 years. Therefore, with this kind of alarm, it will help farmers. But the danger here is that sometimes in such a dry spell season, the rains come very early and then ceases. And farmers sometimes are lured into planting early, and eventually they are left with crops that dry, because when the rain ceases, they lose many of their crops. And therefore, there is a need for extension services. They work along with the meteorological services, with the national orientation agencies, to alert our farmers. Particularly, there is a deliberate movement by government for diversification towards agriculture.
Okay. I introduced my yellow card, Bayo.
Yellow card was abrogated since you left. Don't reintroduce it.
All right, Bayo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do have a good day.
You too.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Time to move on now, but let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll start off our conversation.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on NTA, Africa's largest TV network. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter. Tweet at us at NTAGMN. Now, let's set the ball rolling. And our topic this morning is an alleged plot to disrupt the 2019 elections. Victor Azu, give us the background report.
Exactly 2 weeks ago, government officials revealed plans by desperate politicians to orchestrate widespread violence across the country. A plot that threatens to derail the forthcoming elections.
Armed bandits and Boko Haram insurgents have been mobilized to engage in massive attacks and other acts of violence in several states across the country, including but not limited to Adamawa, Bauchi, Borno, Benue, Kano, Kaduna, Nasarawa, Plateau, Taraba, and Zamfara. The Benue-based armed criminal group, led by Tawase Akwaza, also known as Ghana, has been commissioned to strike some targets in Benue, Nasarawa, and Taraba states. In Kano State, a group of notorious miscreants have been mobilized by some prominent opposition leaders to provoke massive chaos before, during, and after the elections.
Only on Tuesday last week, the National Security Advisor Babagana Monguno, during an election security assessment meeting with the Governors Forum, confirmed that there are indications that some individuals and groups have concluded plans to instigate violence during and after the general elections, stressing the need for peace in the country.
You are more aware than I am that no individual or group is greater or more important than Nigeria. Accordingly, no individual or group's ambition is worth the loss of life of any Nigerian or our national cohesion.
We have received reports of mischievous plans by some unscrupulous elements in connivance with foreign collaborators to disrupt the peaceful conduct of the 2019 general elections in some parts of the country, including here in Taraba State. Let me therefore warn such miscreants to immediately desist from their evil plans forthwith. The Nigerian Army is working closely with the Nigerian police and other security agencies to ensure an enabling environment for the good citizens of our dear country to exercise their civic rights.
With only days left to the general elections, observers are of the view that such reports portend a danger to the people and the nation's democracy. Since then, the questions on the lips of Nigerians have been, who are the individuals behind the plot? What do they stand to gain from such massive violence as alleged? Are there plans to effectively address these concerns? Guests are already seated in the studio to provide answers to these and more as we discuss the issues.
All right, thank you very much, Victor Azu, for that background. Now, joining us on the studio to discuss the alleged plot to scuttle the general elections, let's welcome the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Alhaji Lai, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is the Director General of the National Orientation Agency. That's Dr. Garba Abare. Dr. Abare.
Good morning.
Pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Kinsley.
All right. We also have joined us here in the studio former Director of the Department of State Services, Mike Ejo, for a very familiar face. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
All right, Kingsley.
All right, let's begin again. I mean, you listened to the rather detailed background that we got from Victor Azu, well, of course, including part of the press conference that was addressed by the Honorable Minister of Information. Minister, we have seen the National Security Advisor. We've also seen the Chief of Air Staff and indeed other concerned Nigerians who've spoken to this issue of the alleged plot to disrupt the general elections before, during, or even after. What is the nature of this plot, and do we have a sense of those who are probably behind it?
Well, thank you. It is true from the background reel that on the 21st of January this year, I did address a press conference through which I alerted the nation to the plot to instigate widespread violence, the aim of which is to scuttle the 2019 general elections. Our findings, and this is very credible intelligence, is that it is being sponsored by some naysayers, opposition elements. Of course, when we alerted the nation, the opposition dismissed our claim. But like I said again, we didn't just wake up in the morning and make up this story. It was from credible intelligence. And I'm glad that the National Security Advisor followed a few days later with when he met all the state governors and also alerted them as to the dangers, of instigating widespread violence all over Nigeria. And it was a very detailed intelligence report. We have it on good authority that widespread violence will be instigated in Borno, in Bauchi, in Adamawa, in Nasarawa, in Zamfara, in Benue, in Plateau, in Kaduna, and in Kano. The whole idea is to create widespread violence that will lead to a constitutional crisis, and then at the end of which they will probably be aiming for an interim government.
Well, thank you. We'll return to you, but I want to bring in Dr. Abare, because when we've had you on Good Morning Nigeria, sometimes we've tried to explore the, if you like, the theoretical foundations of some of the issues. This is the 20th anniversary of our Fourth Republic. And historically, part of the challenges that we had in the First Republic and the Second Republic had to do with the fact that civilian to civilian transition was poorly managed. And so violence ensued, and then the military struck. But we have seen in the 20 years of the Fourth Republic a gradual overcoming of that tendency. We saw a transfer from one civilian administration to another, which occurred in 2007. And then much more dramatically, an incumbent administration was electorally ousted by the opposition in 2015. And here we are, the elections are just next week. What, therefore, could be playing out? Can we have a sense of understanding that, hey, we are having this massive plot as alleged by persons who will say, look, it will be nothing else but mayhem?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Kinsley. As you rightly pointed out, it is very true that we have witnessed successful transition from one civilian government to another. The highlight of which was the ousting of an opposition from an incumbent government by an opposition in 2015. What we are witnessing this time around is actually an ascendancy of the stakes. The stakes are getting higher, and there's a lot of desperation on the part of so many people. The stakes are getting higher. There is a lot of desperation on the part of many people. Let's define it clearly. Politicians are getting desperate. And to this extent, they are using all manner of antics. First, to either cause doubt on the credibility of the process. And once the credibility of the process is being questioned, then you can see clearly how the election is being gradually internationalized. Nigeria's election is being gradually internationalized, and therefore foreign forces are taking more than a passing interest in an election that is supposed to be purely a domestic affair. We are a country, an independent country. We are a big a global player. We are a big African player. We constitute a significant part of the world population and the world economy. We are a big market. You know, we have all the resources to make us behave, and we have always been behaving as a responsible government and a responsible country. You know, but when politicians whose interests are now actually coming out to be at stake, to be at risk, they are leaving no stone unturned, which tells you that quite a number of them have learned nothing and have forgotten nothing. To this extent, therefore, they will use their platforms. They will even go to the extent of bringing in mercenaries in order to cause me harm and distort this process. Now, I think I am happy that our security agencies are up and doing, because the information that has led to all the news briefing by relevant government agencies to alert Nigerians on this needs to be commended.
All right, let's put you on hold for the moment. Let's bring in now the former director of the Department of State Services, Mr. Ejiofor. 2015 was adjudged, of course, one of the most credible elections in our history, of course, since the return of democracy. Now, the expectation would have been that 2019 would have taken it a notch better or higher. Do we have a sense, from your perspective, do you have a sense of what the stakes are in this election?
Exactly. You see, ordinarily, I wouldn't have been worried about these allegations and counter-allegations of plans to disrupt the elections. But if you look at where the information is coming from your background report, the Minister of Information addressed journalists and the nation. The National Security Advisor addressed the nation and the governors. And the Chief of Army Staff addressed the nation. So, coming from this background, we need to be worried. But I still tell you that I'm not worried. Because if there are plans and the perpetrators have been identified, the best thing to do is to take on them. Because I don't see why anybody, either in government or in opposition, will want to disrupt the electoral process. I don't understand. So the fact remains that the issues have been raised. The police is the lead agency in maintenance of internal security, and especially the conduct of this election.
All right, I'll put the question again to the Minister of Information and Culture. Beyond, the desire to, of course, get to Aso Rock, what are the stakes really that is driving people to, desperation to win the 2019 elections?
I think you've nailed it in the head. It's a desperation, pure and simple. And I would, also align myself with Dr. Bari. Now, you see, the opposition in particular is overwhelmed by the achievements of this administration, and particularly on the impact the policies and programs have made on the everyday Nigerians. So they are convinced in their own minds that in a free, fair, and peaceful and credible election, they cannot win. So what have they done? What they've done now is to put in motion a set of activities that would ensure that the elections are scuttled, including hiring of mercenaries. And we're not saying these things very lightly. But the dangerous extension of this is what Dr. Garba Abari mentioned in passing. The foreign hostile intelligence services. Some of these local collaborators who are desperate have hooked on and are working with some hostile foreign intelligence services. And this is happening everywhere in the world. We saw what happened in the US, where up to today, the US authorities are still investigating the role of Russia in the last US elections. We saw it happen in Uganda when some foreign countries were actually accused of meddling with internal security of Uganda. Now, in Uganda in particular, some envoys of some foreign countries openly joined opposition protesters in protesting against alleged increase in violence. Now, the trend in the world today is for international hostile, or rather foreign hostile intelligence services to target some countries and try to see the outcome and influence the outcome of elections in those countries. And how do they do this? They do this, one, by spreading fake news. They do it by funding directly or indirectly opposition political parties. They do it also by dangerous, propaganda that spreads, disaffection. And unfortunately, we have seen this manifesting here in Nigeria already. We've seen a particular presidential candidate of opposition who has been having suspicious meetings with envoys of the Western countries in an attempt to show that he has foreign endorsement. Now, what is happening in Nigeria today is not unique to Nigeria. It's happening everywhere in the world. And that is why when we raised this alarm, we raised it because we are concerned as a government. Raised because we know it is true. Raised because we believe that a government like ours that came from the opposition to defeat an incumbent government needs not to rig elections. We have benefited from a free, fair, and credible election. So why are we going to change the rules? And Mr. President has chosen every opportunity to assure the world that not only will his election be free, fair, credible, and peaceful, it will also be seen to be such. And you can see that, I think about a week or two ago, when INEC addressed the National Council of States, he gave a comprehensive account of how the 2019 elections will be free, fair, and credible. And at that Council of States were actually, most of the sponsors of the opposition. And they all adjudged that presentation as detailed and reassuring.
Okay. Can we put you in hold? Sorry, Kingsley. Mr. Mike Ejiofor, the minister mentioned some states, where, of course, information was gotten, Borno, Bauchi, Adamawa, and all that. What, from your view, makes these states vulnerable? Why are they, states that are being, targeted?
Well, the states mentioned actually don't fall into my own analysis of flashpoints in the states. If you talk of flashpoints, like Dr. Barry said, the stakes are really very high. And politicians can go anywhere to generate crisis. If you look at Kano, for instance, look at the dramatic personnel there. You have Kwankwaso and the president, who has large followership. Kwankwaso also has large followership. If you go to Rivers, if you go to Akwa Ibom, you have the influence of the governor and the influence of the former Senate minority leader. You go to Oyo, some of these states, Lagos, if you talk of these states in terms of flashpoints, yeah, I agree. But disrupting the electoral process, I don't see any purpose it's going to serve. Don't also forget that the, what do they call them, CUPP coalition, in December, raised an alarm that government is also trying to scuttle the process. And this is the time where you have allegations. And if you recall 2015, what happened? A lot of propaganda. But these issues being raised now are very grievous national, they have very grievous national security implications that we should not be toying with. Nobody is above the law. But the CUPP also, with the opposition, some of the opposition parties have also raised a laugh that this is an attempt to clamp down on them. So my appeal is that both the government, the opposition, and particularly the politicians should first of all put the interests of this country first. It is very, very important, it's very paramount, because anything, we are consolidating on our democracy. Anything that can derail it now becomes a major problem. I don't see any major problem on the part of INEC. It's been reassuring what they have been saying, that election is going to be free, fair, and credible.
You know, I asked this question because today, Honorable, today, the papers, we have some of the headline stories, you know, some suspected political thugs that were apprehended, you know, with dangerous weapons, you know, coming from some of these states that the Honorable Minister, you know, mentioned. Please go ahead.
I think if you listen carefully to my press conference of 21st of January, I did not just mention states. I said exactly what's going to happen in those states. I mentioned Borno, I mentioned Adamawa, I mentioned Bauchi, and that here the opposition is working in cahoots with the Boko Haram insurgents. I mentioned Kano, and I said here they're going to use notorious miscreants. I mentioned Benue, I mentioned Plateau, and I mentioned Taraba. And I was specific there that a particular criminal gang led by Tewase Akwaza, popularly referred to as Ghana, is going to be the head. Is going to be the head of the, you know, of instigating violence there. Now, this, like I said, these are very credible intelligence, and all the areas I've mentioned, whether it is Adamawa, whether it is Borno, whether it is Bauchi, you know that these are areas that are prone to, you know, insurgency, and where insurgency is really, you know, happening. I'm glad that my brother here also mentioned Kano. Kano, of course, you have a large, you know, you have this history of some miscreants under several names in Kano, or, you know, trying to instigate violence. Now, so we did not just wake up in the morning to make up these stories. They're very credible intelligence, and already, like I said, you can see some of these things actually acting themselves. Who does not know that in the last 3 years, Ghana had tormented the entire, you know, Taraba, Benue, and Plateau states? Who does not know the activities of the Boko Haram insurgents in Borno, especially? But what we are saying is that in the run-up to the 2019 election, there will be an escalation. And this escalation is deliberate and is sponsored. And the whole idea is to scuttle the process. And like I say, there's no reason why they want to do so, except that they know that it's not possible for them to win in a free, fair, and credible election. And you see, that's why at times I'm amused, you know, when there's some, you know, forecasts by foreign intelligence, you know, and I look at any average Nigerian today, you see the kind of enthusiastic crowd that goes to welcome Mr. President everywhere. compared to the apathetic, dwindling crowd of the opposition. So much so that they were concerned when last week they said actually that Mr. President and APC hired foreigners, to come to Kano, because they could not simply believe the kind of, crowd. We're talking about a president who has a cultic followership all over the country.
All right, let's pause you, Minister Lai Mohammed. We'll return to some of the aspects of what you've just raised. Back again to the DG of NOAA, Dr. Abari. We have seen, in the past months, more particularly, a rise in security presence in different parts of the country, north, east, south, and west. Can the country afford an escalation of any election-related violence, premeditated, as alleged, by some persons, for whatever ends?
Not at all. The country can ill afford that. But let me come back to, before I answer that question directly, to what my brother has just said. When you talk about Taraba, Bauchi, Yobe, and Borno as not being flashpoints, I think they are. They are to a very large extent because of their geographical location. They are because I want you to lighten up this. I want you to liken this up with what I refer to as the internalization of the elections. These areas have distinct border economies. They have distinct border locations. The Boko Haram insurgency, especially the Boko Haram elements, especially the one that you find lying from about southwestern Niger down across the Kumadu-Yobe River up to the Lake Chad, going down to the Chari River, all of these are occupying a particular area that is prone to political violence and easy access to weapons and small arms. Most importantly is the fact that that particular axis is now being dominated by a faction of the Boko Haram, which has become an international franchise, the Islamic State in West Africa. And you can see, what do? By their style: abduction, breaking into store, take away, breaking into banks, getting money, hiring mercenaries, abduction for ransom so that they can generate funds. Now, all of these are therefore easy allies that can be utilized, that can be taken, whose services can easily be taken and be paid for by miscreants and by unscrupulous politicians who I refer to that have learned nothing and have forgotten nothing. Now, as to your question, this country can ill afford. Look, we have had 2 elections before now, in Ikiti and in Osun. In Ikiti, 30,000 policemen were deployed. In Osun, 18,000 policemen were deployed, just to keep the peace. We are going for a national election that will cover 8,000 polling units, 170,000 polling units, the whole country, where a country that does not have sufficient police personnel, does not have sufficient military personnel, can ill afford all these flashpoints, of crisis that we are seeing now springing up simply because people are getting increasingly desperate. Now, in this respect, therefore, the responsibility lies on us first as Nigerians to realize that already an election is on the open. The country is completely mobilized towards that. We have seen an incremental improvement in the conduct of our elections. We can see that the ANI is increasingly gaining credibility by the way and manner it is conducting itself with openness. And this is in line with the commitment of the government to deliver on its promise of giving free and fair elections to the country. Now, the stakeholders, therefore, must have to expand. The media must have to also come very well. The parents themselves, political players, political parties and politicians, and civil society. And then, most importantly, the international community must also realize that Nigeria is not, especially those who are actually taking more than a passing interest in our election, that this is not a banana republic. Now, because, again, there is a direct link between what we are seeing as internationalization of this conflict, of the election, and the process. You know, and the narrative that is now being woven by the voice of those who actually are not happy with the process, are saying government is out to emasculate. Government is planning to conscript the space. Government is doing this and that. And that is why a simple move by anybody, and that is also to say that government is afraid of actually applying the laws in the event of any infraction. But you see, but because there is a consistent drive towards ensuring that the space is open, that the process is not being allowed to derail. No one has been picked, despite the fact that there is sufficient evidence to pick anybody, to pick people. But nobody has been picked. But does not mean that government is afraid of picking anybody. They can pick if you want. The security agencies are up and doing. But it is actually in the nature of the regime to say that we are actually, more than any other person, principal beneficiaries of a free and a fair election. So why can we actually distort the process?
All right, Dr. Abari, let's pause. Mike, let's return to you. About 3 weeks ago on Good Morning Nigeria, you were one of our guests when we discussed arms proliferation and its threats to the 2019 elections. But somehow, a part of your response today, you say you're not particularly worried. Okay, fine, because the government, the security agencies, the inter community would appear to be on top of the game. But if we go back again to the plenitude of small weapons and of small arms and light weapons, plus the alleged instigation that is just waiting for a spark, shouldn't this be some serious cause for concern?
Well, it's a difficult one because if you look at the situation, Boko Haram, the opposition working with Boko Haram, what does Boko Haram stand for in the first place? They don't want a democratic government. So, if this allegation that they are working with Boko Haram to disrupt the process, who is interested in disrupting the process? We should be worried. What I said initially, so that I'll be gotten right, that I wouldn't have been worried. But because of the allegations, the quarters they are coming from, I get worried. Okay. The minister, the chief of army staff, the national security are addressing these same issues. And to the DG of nobody is above the law. If you have credible intelligence, credible information on it, anybody can be picked up. Nobody is above the law, and I continue to emphasize that. But let it be also known that there are certain periods where people will be picked up, like now. Then you are going to disrupt the process. If you do that now, if you have credible, there are many ways. We have dialogue. We have, if you have credible intelligence, invite the person, please. This is the information we'll have on you. You are not above the law. The law will take its course as long as you continue to remain. But I don't see the nexus working together between Boko Haram and the opposition or politicians.
Let me just take comment.
Yes.
As far as I see the nexus, and you have established the nexus. You said Boko Haram does not believe in
the democratic government.
And we are talking about an opposition that want to scuttle election because they know they've lost the election. They know that in a free and fair election...
They know that they have lost it. The election has not been concluded.
Let me tell you.
The election has not been concluded.
No, Mike, I know what you said.
Yeah,
this is an opposition that feels the pulse of Nigerians. And they know in their heart that in a free, fair,
credible and peaceful election, they cannot win. So it is in their interest to scuttle it. That is dangerous. Two, you see, we've been talking about COP. And I think, even if I say so, I think it is the credit of this government that a nebulous coalition like COP that has been spreading incendiary rhetoric, disaffection, dangerous propaganda, frivolous court cases, have been allowed to air their views. And this is why I agree with both of you. Oh yes, we are not afraid of picking anybody. But we are very aware too of the Dubai strategy and agenda of the opposition, which falls in line with everything that they are doing now. Through tantrums, make allegations, make dangerous, and provocative statements, all in an attempt to create instability and spread disaffection. Have you seen? And again, what has the government done? That's the one important thing. Yeah. You see, the federal government because the federal government was the first to alert the nation about these, threats. And they've taken, concrete steps. Start with the security. Security has taken adequate measures to enhance security all over the country. As you can see from what the National Security Advisor has said, from the activities of the military and the police. The second thing is that my ministry has already decided that we must sensitize Nigerians about these dangers. And one of the reasons why we're here today is to sensitize Nigerians about these dangers. And a parastatal like the National Orientation Agency, which, fortunately Dr. Abari heads, has the largest reach. It has presence in 774 local governments. We've met and we designed slogans, we designed jingles, which are currently playing on television and radio, on the need to sensitize Nigerians, against this. Mr. President also has come out to tell Nigerians that he will not only conduct fair, credible, and peaceful, but the whole world will see so. But the aces actually are with the common Nigerians.
That's right. That's Dr.
Yes.
Abari.
Yes.
What are your feelings? All right.
Yes,
I just wanted, because we're talking about common Nigerians,
yes,
Honorable Minister.
Yes,
let's pause. Maybe we'll get an emphasis from what you are saying. Yes. What are the field reports that you are getting from your various offices with regard to, one, violence perception for the 2019 general elections, or, the likely disposition of Nigerians? Two, these very weighty allegations that we are hearing, and these allegations have not been denied.
The telltale signs do not give too much cause for cheer. But it depends, it actually comes up from, it differs from one part of the country to the other. In the northeast in particular, for example, in some parts of the areas prone to Boko Haram attacks, we have seen an ascendancy of incidences of kidnapping, of attacks on air. I mean, the recent attack on Rwanda, for example, it gives you a typical example of how this kind of violence is actually being instigated and is recurring and is also spreading at different points. That's one. We have seen incidents. We have just this morning. As I was driving to this, I had on the FRCN that some group of hoodlums, unknown hoodlums, had gone to attack an INEC office and destroyed voters' card and also some materials belonging to the Independent National Electoral Commission. We are witnessing incidences of attack on security agencies by still unknown hoodlums. Who are these unknown hoodlums? You know, so actually, what I will not be surprised is even to see infiltration of our borders by mercenaries who will be brought in by this same group of desperate politicians that are actually bent on causing mayhem. Now, we were anticipating that our sensitization and the advocacy will only remain at the level of talking to the security agencies. Only on the 21st of January, we had our national flag where we brought all the security agencies to talk about the need to synergize. Because a national election, such as the one we are passing through, is one that will task all our national resources. We have to harness every aspect of our security architecture to deploy to ensure that we have an election that is free, fair, and credible, and most importantly, peaceful. But then, going beyond the peace accord that had been signed by the leading politicians, we said these are not the ones that will be on the street to do the fighting. These are not the ones that are bearing small arms. These are not the people who are going to burn government property or unleash mayhem on innocent Nigerians. The people to address are the ones down the ladder. And that is why our sensitization and advocacy is going to each and every corner of the country. We had a national flag off for a peaceful election in all the 774 local governments. We have a national flag off for under our program of keeping a people of peace. And that is why we had partnership with the Christian Association of Nigeria so that they can use their platforms on Sunday to disseminate our sensitization messages for peaceful election. The Jama'atul Nasrul Islam, our traditional rulers. Barely last week I was in Jos and I had meetings with a cross-section of traditional rulers, asking them to use their platform to send out messages because of their outreach with ordinary Nigerians. We are using the media. And of course, the NTA has been a very good partner, and simply because of your outreach.
Sorry, is that a deliberate target in terms of orientation? Because I asked because, like Kingsley said earlier on, this is the 20th year since, you know, our return to democracy. Now, there were those people born during that time would by now be exercising their, you know, democratic franchise. And these are people who probably have no idea of what our electoral history had been. So, do you have a targeted orientation for this category?
We are very deliberate in our choice of targets, the young people. And of course, this is, when you are talking about the young people, you are talking about 70% of Nigeria's population, which is about below the age of 30. So we are very deliberate in our choice of target. That is why we are on social media. We are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, we are on WhatsApp, we are on Togo, we are on Facebook. You know, that is one, because that's why you find them on their smartphone always fiddle. And then we are also on the conventional media. We are also using sensitization, using the platform of the traditional institutions and the religious leaders. We are also using the platform of the various youth groups that you find in every local government. Women groups that you find in every local government, working closely with civil society and the community-based organizations. So we are really very deliberate in our choice of what the targets.
Okay, Honorable Minister, you talked about, of course, the allegations being credible. And Kingsley just also said that, of course, those allegations have not been, you know, denied. He said no one has been picked. Why hasn't anyone been picked or arrested, particularly the Ghana that, you know, has been mentioned?
Ghana has been on the run for the last 3.5 years. We inherited Ghana, and Ghana has been on the run. We identify his group. Ghana is just, you know, an instrument being used. Ghana, you know, criminal activities predates even this administration. And I can assure you the authorities are on its stream. Now, you see, Nigerians themselves, like I said, hold the aces. Why? They are the ones that must not allow themselves to be used by desperate politicians to scuttle these elections. They must be the ones that will say no to purveyors of fake news and also those who are spreading very divisive, dangerous propaganda. See, we very early in this administration were worried that fake news and hate speech was going to play a major role in the 2019 elections. And as far back as 2017, we devoted an entire National Council on Information meeting in Plateau State to address these issues. When it became obvious to us that people are not listening, we launched a national campaign against fake news. And I must thank the NTA, FRC, and Vanguard, and other media organizations that have partnered with us. Today, we have succeeded in bringing to the front burner of national discourse the issue of fake news and hate speech. But unfortunately, it is the same fake news and hate speech that the opposition is now latching onto. And frankly speaking, many of them just want to be picked. They are deliberately provoking the federal government, provoking agencies. But of course, the intelligence community is very smart also. Let them burn themselves out. But we ensure by the activities, that the activities are nip in the bud. And it's simply because they know they've been found out. That is why you can see more outbursts coming from them. But once again, these allegations are credible, and the federal government is not sleeping over it. The federal government security agencies are doing everything, and especially in the era of sensitization, we are working day and night to ensure that the average Nigerians understand the issues. And the beauty of it is that, and we are glad that, when you look at the kind of enthusiastic crowd that welcomes Mr. President, you can see that any attempt to scuttle this election will be resisted even by the common man, because they've seen what it was before and what it is now.
All right, that's Lai Mohammed, Minister of Information, and the other guests. Gentlemen, we'll take a short break now. When we return, we will take the reactions that have come by way of tweets, plus, of course, continuing with the conversation.
NTA TV College regrets to announce the postponement of 2 short courses, Camera Operation Techniques and Photojournalism Photography, earlier scheduled for 4th February to 1st March 2019 and 4th to 29th March 2019, respectively. A new date will be communicated to the public as soon as the general elections are over. All inconveniences caused by this postponement are regretted. Please, for further inquiries, please contact us on 0803 314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. TV College Jos, training you to be the best you want to be.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you as always live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We, as we said, have some tweets, and we'll quickly take them and then return to our guests. This is coming from Law Alpha Seed. If there are plans whatsoever to frustrate the general elections, then the security agencies should up their game to rubbish the plots.
All right, Mike, tweets. Political space have recently been inundated with various allegations and counter-allegations of plots to disrupt 2019 elections by some individuals. Unfortunately, any step taken by INEC are condemned by some politicians who never see anything good for them. This is too bad.
Dele Jack Solomon has this next tweet. Now, if it is true, that's to say the allegation, according to him, that credible intelligence has it that bandits and Boko Haram insurgents have been mobilized to engage in massive attacks and other acts of violence in several states across the country during the election, it's not a good omen for our democracy. But what is the security apparatus at the disposal of the federal and state governments going to do to counter these intentions in order to make a success of the 2019 polls?
And Chris Simeon tweets, Nigeria is not a banana republic. Those behind this plan should immediately be sanctioned. These are the people who do not want this country to progress. They want to set this country on fire, and God will not give them the chance to do so.
Again from Law Alpha C. Now, the level of unemployment and austere state of the economy has made elections a do-or-die affair for people to remain relevant. Now, for all the promises made by leaders preparatory to the general elections, President Buhari still vows to produce a credible, free, and fair election.
All right, I have Festus Kimboiwa. Sadly, the unreasonable utterances of politicians and the massive weapons they have amassed show the seeds for disruption of the 2019 election has been sown. Now, government, INEC, security agencies, and the electorate must be proactive to ensure the election is not disrupted. This election is very crucial for the future of Nigeria, and as we are getting closer to election, government and various security forces must be proactive to ensure insurgents are not able to strike and disrupt the election.
Another one again from Mike Ayankwa. It says, I was in New York during the 2018 U.S. midterm elections. Hardly would one notice that elections before, during, or after, hardly one would notice that there were elections before, during, and after, unlike what we witness in Nigeria. Businesses are stalled, people relocating their children to villages, no vehicular movement, and tension everywhere. That's a very pertinent observation, by the way.
Indeed, yeah.
I witnessed elections in the U.S. and, you know, it's smooth sailing.
Well, the last
and
one...
elsewhere, in some parts of Africa, by the way. Let's note that.
I was in Cape Verde, Kingsley, some time back. A small country, you may say, but clean process, very smooth process. Sure. And with Dele Jack Solomon tweets, NTA and other media should help in sensitizing members of the public on observed threats which are capable of disrupting the 2019 elections. Furthermore, we appeal to general populace if they notice any suspicious moves to say something, because the success of the election depends on us. And of course, as the jingle will always say, if you see something, say something.
That's with regard to terrorism. It also applies now with regard to violence.
Precisely.
I mean, it has maybe instigated at any point in time. Just to, again, back up on the likely sources of violence and conflict. It is often said that all politics is local. Now, it's been identified that the desperation, you know, for the villa is probably stoking some of the plots and plans that we have heard about. What could possibly be afoot at the subnational level? Because if violence begins to bubble from the smaller units, and those incidents are not contained, contained or curtailed, then we might have a conflagration. Dr. Abari, yes, we can look at the national level, say those are national players, but shouldn't we also focus on the local levels?
Absolutely, we should. In fact, we should focus on all levels, from the federal down to the local governments. Because, in fact, it is at the local governments that the focus should actually be more. Because these are areas where the fighters, the miscreants, whatever, will be recruited. And we have seen actually that in some of the states, the telltale signs, like I earlier said, do not actually give you much cost to share. There are states with over 70 gubernatorial candidates. The political space is getting more tenuous. We have seen incidences of use of intemperate language. We have seen lack of political tolerance with opposition parties and opposition elements, or political parties going about tearing the campaign posters of one another. You know, and this is for both the incumbent and for the opposition as well. So in this respect, all are guilty. We have seen incidences of how the campaigns are actually being characterized with a lot of violence. In some instances, with gunshots, you know, dispersing people and the rest of them. We have seen how the physically challenged are being gradually excluded because of the tenuous environment. We have seen how women have been excluded because for very obvious reasons they will not be part of the gangsterism that we are seeing is on the ascendancy. So the focus actually should go down from the top to the middle, down to the lower level, but more especially to the local government level where most of these miscreants are being recruited. And it is therefore against this backdrop that we are sending this message to parents to take more than a passing interest in what their wards and the children are doing. That's one. Two, for each and every Nigerian also to develop the sense of responsibility and create within ourselves that we need first and foremost to keep the peace. And the moment we say we want to keep the peace, we want to obey the law, we want to do the right thing, we want our democracy to flourish, we want to keep the peace in the country and ensure that everything goes well, then from that extent, we can say, or from that perspective, we can say that we are standing up to desperate politicians.
Right. Let me bring in the Honourable Minister. I'm sorry, Michael, we'll get to you presently. It's just about 12 days to, you know, the elections, and election violence are also triggered, of course, when the process is either flawed or compromised. Now, there have also been, you know, allegations of, you know, some sort of, you know, tampering, you know, with this process. Can the Honourable Minister give us a sense of how transparent and credible the process, you know, have been made by, you know, the authorities?
I believe once again that this attempt to taint certain principal actors is part of the comprehensive plan to scuttle the elections. Like I said earlier on, I think a few days ago, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, addressed the Council of State on the steps and preparations they made to ensure a free, fair, credible elections. It's instructive that that meeting was attended by all the major gladiators, former heads of states, the presiding officers of the National Assembly, governors, everybody. And everybody applauded the presentation of the INEC chairman and commended him for the detailed presentation and the assurance it gave. You see, the easiest way to want to scuttle elections is by creating doubt and saying that the umpire himself is biased. And this is what I say to it. And I think if you look at the elections that have been conducted by INEC in the last 3-4 years, it has been improving from one to the other. And I keep saying again, Mr. President has been a beneficiary of a free, fair, and credible election. His confidence in the electoral and legal system is undoubted because he keeps saying that but for the reforms in the electoral process, he would not today be the president, having lost 3 times. in his bid to become president. Now, those who are accusing INEC, we want to please come out with your documented allegations and evidence. So we want to assure Nigerians, because we believe so, that INEC is prepared and willing to give us a free, fair, and credible election. And on the part of government, we are going to ensure that the election is conducted in a very peaceful atmosphere.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Dr. Abari already talked about the need to cascade attention down to the local level. In terms of forestalling violence or disruption of the elections, we already discussed on this program again, just by way of reminder, the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. But we also have seen in various election cycles in the country the emergence of rogue security agents. Some persons are alleged to procure or otherwise sew fake uniforms for policemen, who are usually, of course, who are the principal, who are the lead agency in security, some, military uniform, and so on and so forth. And if this has been a regular feature in some parts of the country, what can be done to ensure that these rogue elements do not have the opportunity of procuring or putting on their uniforms and becoming agent provocateur? In other words, instigating violence and saying, all right.
Now, you see, we've talked so much on this issue. I don't know what gives me the confidence that INEC is ready to conduct free, fair election because of the process. Where you have violence are areas where the process is flawed, like ballot box snatching. With PVC, you can't do that anymore. That's why the politicians are getting very desperate, because our votes must count.
No, Mike, I'm sorry to interject. Look, if somebody, I mean, it's part of the calculations that they would have. I mean, if you have covered elections in this country for many years, you would know, you were a state director. If there's an opposition stronghold that you say, okay, these guys are strong, let us go and disrupt the election. If you disrupt the election, they are bringing in these rogue elements. You can't have your PVC.
No. Listen, that's where I was going to.
All right.
If where you use those rogue elements in the past, where you snatch ballot boxes, but INEC has told us that any center that is disrupted, the election will be cancelled there or postponed. Okay. So that takes care of it. Okay. Whether you are a rogue element, you sew military uniform, you sew army uniform, to go and disrupt the election in of course, we have our security bed. That's why I also get worried, because, he talked about, the DG talked about deployment of 30,000 policemen in Ekiti and Oshu and all the rest of it. Where are you going to get those to deploy now? It becomes a problem. So we need to sensitize our people that election is our service to our people. We need, just not at the local level alone. We have 12 days to go. So I expect that the government, I said it the last time, should now, on regular basis, summon the political leaders, confront the people or the opposition as being alleged of the facts on ground, and let them resolve it there. Then you can use dialogue to solve all these things. Because the point remains that if you pick up anybody now, they are going to read political meanings into it. So let us have regular meetings between the political leaders, religious leaders, INEC, security agencies, on regular, maybe until we conduct our first election.
Honorable Minister, you seem not to be in agreement from the way you were shaking your head.
I'm worried about these rogue elements, and I think that the security is aware, and they must, do something about it, because it's part of an attempt to scuttle elections. For you to go to the stronghold of your opposition and disrupt your opponent and disrupt elections, knowing that election will be cancelled there, it's a very effective way of actually not having a free and fair election. So I think the issue you raised about rogue element is very, very important. Security, intelligence must be up and doing, and largely this is again the responsibility of the average Nigerian. If you see any strange movements, please report immediately to the authorities.
All right, Honourable Minister, just before we return to you for probably what will be our last question, we have more tweets coming in. Again, tweeted us at NTA Chairman. We have a few minutes to go. Ibrahim Tudu, security agencies should have the names of those planning the disruption of 2019 election. No smoke without fire. We should go after the source of the fire. Nigeria has its enemies, so the usual known enemies should be the primary suspects. Long live Nigeria.
And Sani Michael Omakoji tweets, now, I wouldn't say that those who are raising alarm are raising false alarm, as violence witnessed so far in the name of politics is enough to raise such an alarm.
All right, and Abdul says the challenge remains with the security agencies, especially the police, DSS, and other paramilitary outfits, to do everything within their intelligence network to fish out and deal decisively with anyone or groups that are planning any evil during or before the elections.
Now, Awunaji Joshua has this tweet, they want to live, but they don't want others to live. The plot, if true, is selfish, lazy, and cowardly. Human beings are not bushmeat. The federal government and security agencies should try their best to protect our constitutional right to live.
All right, and Sani Michael or Marco J tweets, I pray God helps us in the forthcoming election, as the level of desperation leading to the killing of many is unacceptable. Just yesterday, he says, one with 3 others were murdered at a rally in Kogi State by some suspected thugs.
And this is coming from Abdul again. It says, I suggest that if any person is apprehended for any unlawful act before or during the elections and that person is linked to any candidate, investigation should be properly carried out and that candidate should be banned from participating in future elections and, if possible, jailed. I think the thing is to jail before you ban.
Kinsley, you have more tweets
That's
here,
right.
Let me
that's
quickly
right.
take on this one. Akeju or Lagbaju, I hope that's the name. Any attempt to disrupt the election is an attempt to truncate democracy and, simply put, is a robbery on democratization. Hence, they should be treated as robbers.
And Amokbolahom Ogbeni tweets, it says, it's not impossible that politicians who are desperate to have their way back into the mainstream will go to any length to have their way. The government of the day must therefore leave no stone unturned in responding adequately to the plot. This is all about desperation. A lot of politicians aren't finding things easy. That's the truth. Now, many have lived a life dependent on public funds, but now that there is a gradual change of a narrative, a fight back can't be ruled out.
All right, Cecilia Okoroma, it's the common man or common people that will be used to cause mayhem. People that will be abandoned to die by desperate politicians that will flee.
And we have this other one. Let's just skip. Yeah, we have seen already from Cecilia Okoroma, Abdul, and Dele Jack Solomon. This is interesting from Dele Jack Solomon. So we advocate the use of technology like drones and satellite surveillance by our security agencies for the 2019 general elections to boost our intelligence capabilities against terror groups with the intention of thwarting the elections and the electionary process.
All right, I'd like to go back to that Cecilia Okoroma Kinsley. And this one, she directs this to the DJNOA. And it says, DJNOA must rise to the occasion of educating Nigerian youth immediately, using tank criers, staging shows, and so on. We want peace, she says.
Usman Bani Kantu tweets, now the frequent seizures of arms and dangerous weapons at our borders and the tricks being used to import these arms is quite alarming and confirms this allegation. Therefore, persons involved in such plans should be exposed and sanctioned with penalties.
Okay, Ibrahim Moduaji, unlike the 2015 polls where elections were held in IDP camps in Borno State capital, now that IDP camps are camped in their vulnerable ancestral homes, drastic measures need to be put in place during and after election. 7th Division of Nigerian Army Maiduguri needs to brace up.
Festus Akimboyewa has this last tweet. It says, sadly, with INEC being attacked every day by politicians, creating the impression that the election will be rigged, the seeds of violence may have been sown already. My prayer is that innocent people and communities will be protected. But let's get this clear. The reports with regard to allegations of various plots to disrupt the election by way of violence is not intended to scare voters, is it, Dr. Abari?
It's not intended to scare voters. Yes. In fact, if anything, it is actually intended to bring to the public domain that there are people who do not wish the country well, and therefore we must all rise up and resist them.
All right, which means that in 12 days' time, when voting begins, take your PVC and go to the polling station and cast your ballot. It's very important that we stress that again. Nobody is saying this because we want to be scared away from the polling booth. We have 84 million registered voters. Not all of them have collected their PVCs, but if you have your PVC, go to any of the 120,000 polling stations already created by INEC and cast your vote. We also have smart technology, smartphones. If there are incidents of violence, we record them, and some of those things could be used as electronic evidence in the course of trial.
All right, let me get a last word from the Honourable Minister. What might you be saying to the international communities at this moment?
Well, I think what I'll be saying to them is to be very cautious and to please have constant dialogue with the host governments. They must resist the temptation of meddling in the internal affairs of any host country, especially trying to influence the outcome of our electoral process. Our appeal to them is that they must understand that this president in particular has assured Nigerians of a fair, free, credible election. And he means it. We have prepared for it, and they should not try to give the impression that they've already aligned with the opposition. They should look at what is on ground and be restrained in their comments.
All right. It's on that note, of course, that we draw the curtain on the conversation segment on Good Morning Nigeria today. We'd like to thank our three guests, plus, of course, viewers who sent in their tweets. Appreciation to Mike Ejiofor. Mike Ejiofor is former director of Department of State Services. He's also a lawyer and a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. Mike,
thank you.
Thanks a lot for being around. Our appreciation also to the DG of the National Orientation Agency, Dr. Garba Abari. Dr. Abari, you have a lot of work on your hands.
A lot.
So best of luck.
Thank you so much, Kinsley.
Okay, we also would like to thank the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Kinsley, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so let's go over now. We're going over to our sports desk. Yeah, that's we're pressed for time. Let's take our sports now. Yes.